I should have asked yesterday, how do you say your last name?
Morales, or Morales is probably easier.
Morales. Yeah. Okay. Kevin Morales here. I'm Stacey. I'm with East Leader 6. I'm our community impact manager. So I do like our events and sustainability and things like that. So I'm here to introduce Kevin. Do you want me to read your bio, Kevin?
Sure, go for it.
Kevin is a jackass of all trades.
Way to start it.
I haven't even read this yet. He has worked as a private investigator, furniture mover, and a journalist before falling into the world of tech and eventually into logistics and sustainability. He spent 15 years at FedEx in product management and marketing, working on everything from wine delivery and reverse logistics to overseeing the 20 million modernization of FedEx global analytics application used by over 100,000 customers to analyze 70 billion in transportation spend. After receiving one oversized box too many, he conducted an analysis, reducing emissions analysis showing how FedEx could save hundreds of millions annually while increasing capacity and reducing emissions by driving the adoption of right sizing, which led him to focus on sustainability and logistics. Shortly afterwards, he was recruited to become the chief sustainability officer for a 165 million electronics distributor, where he started developing his sustainability and profitability, which he will share with you today. Since then, he has been featured on multiple podcasts and has asked to join the ESG Advisory Committee for Responsible AI. In February, he joined another logistics startup, but he suffered from sudden paycheck detachment syndrome in July after it encountered financial turbulence. He is currently providing consulting in sustainability, marketing, and product management. While he did a bad job of picking his last employer, he did a much better job of choosing his life partner, who is much smarter and better looking than he is. Not only did she bless him with 3 amazing daughters, but she brought him to Columbus last January when she got a job at a small university in town, the Ohio State. They really enjoy the Midwestern friendliness in summers and the sunrise views over the cornfields from their house across the street from OSU farm in Upper Arlington. He unfortunately can't be in person today as his mom passed away in Tuesday. So he is in Los Angeles and he's joining us from there. Kevin, whenever you're ready, you're up.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And I do want to say thank you to everybody who's sent their condolences. It's been a kind of a rough week in the Morales household. But I do want to take a second to just express my intense gratitude to the people who made the transition from life to afterlife. For my mom, just did a wonderful job of supporting, and it was kind of amazing, to be honest. So, I'm going to try not to cry at all, but I also have a deep sense of gratitude and joy. But with that, I want to transition to what you guys are all here for, which is logistics and sustainability and profitability, right? Because everybody wants to be sustainable, but you have to be profitable. And, I made the transition to sustainability, really focusing on it a few years ago, and I found it confusing as hell. So what I'm going to try to do over the next 40 minutes is provide some simple frameworks, some tips, some guidance that you can use as you think about, how do you become more sustainable? Because, we are in a climate crisis, temperatures are through the roof, or droughts, everything else. But even if the reality is you guys have businesses to run, and you got to figure out how to do things profitably and sustainable. And so I'm here to help you with that. I'm looking forward to this being as interactive as possible. Now, obviously, I'm not there, which makes it a little bit more challenging. But please feel free to answer questions, speak out, and hopefully we'll have some fun. So with that, I'm going to just kick things off. So who wants to be a supply chain sustainability hero, but is wondering how? Right? You're there on the left and just trying to think, how do we get there? And when you hear the term sustainability, what comes to mind? Is it complicated and expensive? I know that's what I hear over and over again. And, be honest, raise your hands. How many of you think that being sustainable will be more expensive require you to spend more, have a more costly operation. Anybody? Are you guys thinking it's going to be easy? All right, I think I got you this. The good news is decarbonizing, being more sustainable to cut costs, right? Energy efficiency, plunging solar costs, tax incentives drives cost savings. And in logistics, you can cut your costs and emissions in tandem. That's the great news. And that's what I'm going to walk through. Right sizing packaging, you get cost savings of 10 to 30% on your transportation, on your packaging. You know, when you begin to distribute closer from the customers, right, you drive cost savings in transportation. There's all sorts of things, but the bottom line is, I'm here to tell you, I'm going to show you how to save money and be more sustainable. Also, sustainability sells, right? Amazon in 2024 is going to require suppliers to report emissions and set climate goals. Consumers are also looking for more sustainable options. But I'm going to tell you, it's the Fortune 100s, it's the governments that are all setting mandates for their suppliers. And that's going to be the real driver. So for folks that want to do business, particularly in the B2B sector, pretty soon it's going to go from a nice to have to a must have. So sustainability sells. 1 second. Let me put on my timer here before I yak too long. So what's the biggest driver of emissions? Is it warehousing, packaging, or transportation? I'll give it away. So warehousing represents probably 10% in logistics. Packaging, call it 20 to 30%. And transportation by far is the biggest driver. And so how much do freight emissions contribute to the climate crisis? Is it 5%, 10%, or 20%? Anybody who thinks 5%, raise your hand. All right, who thinks 10%? 20%? Anybody raise their hand at all? Okay, I see some. The answer is 10%. It's hard for me to, I kind of see stuff in this little square here, but it's 10%. So right, total global emissions, freight, logistics are on 10%. The thing is, it's on track to go to 20% by 2050 unless we do something. And each gallon of diesel burn generates 22 pounds of CO2. So when you think about 1 pound of diesel equals 3 times that of CO2. So it was hard for me to fathom. I'm like, right, it's a gas. But it actually, like, it becomes heavier because we're combining oxygen, and so it's a problem. But what are the keys to sustainability in logistics, right? It's pretty straightforward. It's minimize transportation miles, minimize the amount of packaging, and the energy and pollutants per mile in transaction. I mean, so if you think about it, what drives your costs? Transportation miles, packaging, energy use. So it's pretty much a direct correlation between the two. So now let's get serious. Who likes beer? Hand raising, anybody? All right. So let me ask you, care about the bottle, the distance traveled, or the beer? I think most people care about the beer, right? And if you think about the ideal is there's no transportation nor packaging, right? In this beer supply chain, right? You go from manufacturing to drinking. So that's the ideal. But in most cases, right, you don't have that, right? You're going to have your brewing, you have your bottling, you're going to load it on a truck, you're going to drive it across the country, put it in a warehouse, take it out, where people actually drink it, and then dispose of the bottle. So now let's take a look at that. Like, which of these steps add value and which are waste, right? The bottle, frankly, it's waste. I mean, it's critical if you're going to do this. Loading on a truck, moving on across the country, storing it. I'm going to argue that, being able to, the drinking, the location to drink, the drinking, but all this is waste. So if you can get rid of that, the more you can reduce of that, the more value you're delivering, the more profits you're delivering. And so when you think about, as you move forward, is all movement and packaging pretty much is waste. I mean, we're critical as logistics professionals, but the more we can reduce of it, the better off we are, right? And that's going to be the fundamental thing that you just need to be thinking about, which is what you guys do, right? We do this on a daily basis, trying to think about how do we make logistics more efficient? And that's really what this is about. So again, along the same lines, how do you price freight transportation, right? It's weight cube times distance times mode because of your shipping costs, right? More or less, right? Then how do you calculate freight transportation pollution? It's weight cube distance times mode equals your shipping emissions. It's the same exact thing. So if you figure out how to cut your waste, cut your cubic dimensions, you cut your distance, adopt cheaper, more efficient modes, you cut your shipping costs and emissions in tandem, right? So as freight professionals, you guys think about this all the time. And so instead of sustainability driving costs, really it's driving a green profit premium. Now, let me ask questions. What's more important, reducing weight or cube? Who thinks reducing weight of their shipments is more important versus who thinks weight's more important? Okay, who thinks cutting their cube, their dimensions is more important from a sustainability perspective? And all right, I'm seeing enthusiasm. Nobody wants to take the risk. So I'm going to tell you. So planes and trucks almost always cube out before weighing out. Cargo weight has zero impact on ocean shipping emissions. There's only a 15 to 30% change in emissions between a fully loaded truck and an empty truck. And really the cargo just represents a small percent of plane weight and emissions. If you want to reduce the cube, reduce cost and emissions. That's the single biggest thing. Weight, really, it's not that important. So let's start with cutting dimensions to fit more items in the same space. So how do we, and what's the technical term for this strategy? Right sizing. I just tell people fit more stuff in the same space, right? And that's why I'm here, because I got this box, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, dang, that's just a lot of empty space. And I measured it, and it turned out to be like 90% empty space. And since I had access to all the FedEx data, I was like, wow, we're shipping millions of this. This is an entire warehouse of empty space. And so that's how I wound up falling into this wormhole and getting to sustainability. And today, poor packaging practices result in an average box being 20 to 40% bigger than required, right? Generating huge amounts of easily avoidable emissions, air pollutants, packaging waste, and costs. It drives inefficiency, from a transportation. If you're looking at 20 to 40% increase in miles and driven flown, building and maintaining extra aircraft vehicles, largely needed aircraft vehicles, the energy required to move additional packaging weight. And from a packaging impact perspective, you're looking at a lot of additional trees cuts, oil wells, the manufacturing energy and pollution, additional packaging waste, all the increased void fill dunnage required to occupy the empty space. So, right, it's just a lose, lose, lose. And the good news is, though, small size reductions can drive huge capacity increases. So after implementing a right-sizing system, a national retailer increased trailer capacity by 75% while saving $1.3 million in packaging costs. So right, they went from 800 packages per trailer to 1,400 packages per trailer. That's just massive, right? And I hear these stories all the time. Another shipper avoided 90 truckloads and cutting down the equivalent of 5,600 trees. And there was a big push to move from 28 to 33-foot trailers. And really, just right sizing, we can deliver the same or greater emissions reductions benefits than that. I mean, so the upsides are huge. So what are some ways you can reduce your cube, right? You can design. So there's a great story about HP. They designed their printers so they could be shipped and stacked without boxing. So end result, they were able to fit twice as many in the same space, resulting in a 50% reduction in cost and emissions, right? If you're using 50%, less, air cargo planes, trucks, etc., you're cutting your costs and your emissions in half. Postpone, so right, move things in bulk with minimal packaging, and then package close to the recipient. So again, HP designed their system so that they could move things, with minimal packaging, and then they move the packaging close to the final recipient. Particularly when you're looking at, like in Europe, where you have many languages, many countries. For them, not only did it save them money on the logistics, but they didn't have to worry about, knowing 60 to 90 days in advance is like, do I need more French or I need more German packages? They could just, package much closer, save them money, not just on transportation, but on a lot of repacking and switching things. And then ship without additional packaging, right? So Amazon is, rewarding vendors for being able to ship their packages without overboxing. And that's going to be a bigger and bigger thing. Customers want that. And so, we're going to need to design so you can ship without additional packaging. And, when you do that, you rank higher in the Amazon scores. Correctly measure, right? This guy, he's 8 by 8 by 8. But he's in the system as 10 by 10 by 10 because, the numbers were wrong, which then somebody picked a 10 by 10 by 10 box, which resulted in more costs and emissions versus when you measure, you store the information correctly, you use the right box, you save money, right? Pretty straightforward, but it can drive millions in savings. Then you can buy. So you use the AI to determine which boxes to buy. So you'll upload your order history with all the dimensions. The AI recommends options. You select the box to buy based on, do I want 10 sets of boxes? Do I want 8 different boxes? Do I want one that's going to save me the most on transportation, that most ecological friendly, whatever? It gives you options. And again, you're going to save time, money, and the planet. So then you're going to use AI to determine which boxes to use, right? You got this order of this order of stuff, right? You got these box options. You got your packer trying to say which one, and it tells you, use this box. So again, you're saving money, you're saving time, making things easier. Particularly, it's like people are very bad at trying to figure out what box to put things in, particularly if you're packing into a box before you even have the order. Then you have make. Box on demand solutions cut and form boxes for the shipment. So right, you got your order, you have a box or bag maker, it just generates the box on demand or in advance, depending on your workload, to put the items in. So you're minimizing the amount of space. This is the most efficient mode, but it takes some work to optimize your DC, right? Particularly if you've got an existing, where do you fit it in? How do you flow it in? Which is where the software stuff is, you don't get quite as much reduction, but it's much easier to implement. And then you have make, pack, and ship. So you have automated systems that eliminate the need for manual packing and labeling. So, right, you have your unboxed item that goes in and your boxed item that goes out. And you wind up reducing, your labor costs by as much as 80% as well. So, right, those are all just a few things that you can do to cut your cube. So let me ask, any questions? You guys learn anything new? You guys all knew this already. Come on, work with me. All right, I got a tough audience today. So next, cut distances to minimize miles traveled, fuel usage, emissions, right? And, for most of you, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but right, something you can do is you shorten distances, you want to straighten routes, ship less frequently, avoid dead haul. So again, you guys work in the space, so you probably don't need me to explain this to me, right? You got a factory out on the West Coast, you have 5 suppliers, the average distance is about 1,700 miles. So for every 10 widgets, you got 8,600 miles of transportation. Now you got 10 customers, and their average is about 1,800 miles. So the total distance is about 18,000 miles if each orders one widget. So your total make and deliver distance is about 27,000 truck miles for 10 widgets, right, from make to sell. If you move your factory to Centerville, USA, you're going to cut your emissions by, in this case, 44%, right? This is network optimization 101. And I ran the numbers looking at the US population. So like LA is by far the biggest distribution center. Everything comes from Asia, right? Moving out of LA into, say, Chicago, St. Louis, and so I ran these numbers before I moved to Columbus, but you're looking at over 40% reduction in distance, which is about a 40% reduction in emissions. Right? There's a 1-to-1 correlation. Each 1% reduction in mileage equals a 1% reduction in emissions. And if you split your inventory, moving it closer, you're looking at getting the 65, 70% reductions in mileage and emissions, which, again, no fancy tech required to drive significant costs, both cost and transportation savings, right? It also reduces your costs. You look here, right, in Southern California, if you're shipping parcel, about nearly 40% of your shipments are going to be zone 8, right? If you move to Chicago, it winds up being about 40% becomes zone 5, becomes your primary, very little zone 8. And if you move, like, split to Atlanta and Vegas, now the majority is zone 4. So again, driving cost savings. And Bath and Body Works represents a real life example, right? They opened the beauty park, and a huge hats off to them, right? They went from shipping for their, one of their products, nearly 13,000 miles to 11 miles, right? So what did that drive? About a 99.99% reduction in freight transportation pollution per product from a manufacturer, right? Inevitably, when you have long supply chains, you're going to have those emergency shipments via air. Air is awful. We'll go into that. So reduce their air freight shipments, their business flights from and to Asia. They reduce their packaging, waste from damaged inventory, right? The more you move, the more damage you're going to get. And when you have longer lead times, the higher likely you're going to wind up with unsold inventory. So huge benefits from a sustainability and a profitability. And this is, again, my goal is to help you figure out how to be sustainable and profitable. I'm sorry, can someone repeat that? Someone say something?
No one said anything.
Okay, sorry, I heard something. So then ship less frequently, right? So like, let's take that example, that the supply chain moved it in the United States. Let's say you're shipping daily, but you're shipping partial loads, half a truckload daily, right? So you got 30 times 6,400, like 192,000 miles, right? If you ship full loads every other day, you cut that in half. Again, cutting your emissions in half. And it's simple stuff, and a lot of people are doing it, but does everybody do every piece of it? To wind up with that reduction in miles, reduction in fuel emissions. I'm going to avoid dead haul to avoid twice the emissions, right? Today, about 35% of all truck miles are empty miles, so eliminating the outbound trips often eliminates empty return trips, or doing your planning in a way that eliminates that empty truck, because, right, that's just all emissions and no value. And then route plan optimization, depending on what trucks, you can get 5, 10, 20% reduction in mileage and emissions. Finally, switch modes to reduce fuel usage and emissions. So you want to adopt a more efficient mode, which almost inevitably is a cheaper mode, right? air freight is by far the most expensive and polluting mode. It's about 5x more polluting, 5 to 6x than truck, and I forget the numbers, but it's many, many, many times more than train or ship. It's awful. Plus, contrails actually nearly double the warming impact of air shipping. They're really, it's bad. And then with the express hub and spoke models, you can drive 2 to 5x distances and emissions. So let's take this, right? You're shipping from DC to Boston. It's about 400 miles, as the bird flies. And if you go by road, by Google, it's about 440 miles. If you use Express, so you ship it via Express, well, is it going to fly straight? No, it's going to go to UPS, it's going to Louisville. So that's nearly 500 miles one way, another 800 miles the other way. So now you're looking at 1,300 miles. So like 17 times greater emissions than truck. But now if you use FedEx and it gets routed through the Memphis hub, now you're looking at, 1,900 miles and 24 times the emissions as truck. So, that's, not only is it more emissions on a per mile basis, but with the hub and spoke model of express systems, you can wind up flying much, much further. Plus, the liftoff is the most energy intensive. In this case, you have 2 liftoffs, right? You have initially out of Washington, then out of Memphis or Louisville. So huge, huge impact. In fact, air shipments drive up to 80% of FedEx and UPS emissions, right? From FedEx perspective, it's about 80% of their emissions. So they could get rid of every truck, they could electrify everything, and they would still have 80% of their emissions because of express shipping. So every express shipment is the equivalent of like 10 to 20 ground shipments. Take that, into consideration. So stop shipping by air to reduce emissions by 80+%. I think there's a little bit of a lag. That's what I'm hearing myself. So with truck, moving from air to truck, you're looking at an 80% reduction just on a straight line. But again, we know things don't move straight, so it can be many, many times more than that. Ship, you're looking at about a 97% reduction versus air. And train, it's about a 98% reduction versus air. And then, right, we do have to use Express. So if you can co-locate next to Express air hubs, so you have direct flights, right? If it's a big part of your business, then that avoids those extra miles. Or use direct flights on commercial air. So, right, there's a variety of new startups, including the one that I was working for, which are basically looking to leverage commercial air and do much more point-to-point, and then drop into regional providers or even the FedEx of the world. So, and because they're already flying, you're avoiding incremental emissions, but you're getting more of this point-to-point, right? From Chicago, you can pretty much get to any city directly, LAX, Atlanta, DFW. Or move your inventory closer to your customers to cut the need for air shipping, right? So if you got one DC, you get 2 days about 60%. 2, you move it up to 90%. 3, 99%. And your next day, again, you still only about 20%, but you can do things to, minimize the need for Express. And then ask your providers what they're doing to eliminate contrails. Really, just in the last week, they announced some new results that computer models they can use to figure out the flight patterns to cut contrails by 54%. And really, it represents about half of the global warming potential of planes. And then don't pay for air shipping if you don't if you don't have to. Use analytics and transportation management systems generally. You can use cheaper, less polluting options that deliver similar transit times, right? Why pay for Express it can go ground, but, use services, whether, at the point of shipping, there are analytic services you can use to help you, identify, optimize. So again, it's the same tool suite that you use to reduce your costs that you use to reduce your emissions. And if shipping by truck, ship to boat or train, right? You're looking at an 80% reduction versus truck on ship and about a 90% reduction versus truck. Train is by far the most efficient mode. Sadly, as somebody came out of parcel world, it was kind of shocking to discover like how backwards our rail system is. But that's, by far the most efficient option, even more efficient than electric trucks. And then more transportation options are coming in the market, right? You have electric, natural gas, biodiesel, hydrogen. These are all beginning to come in, and you're beginning to see adoption like in California, but there are other things beyond that, right? Ease Logistics here is pioneering platooning here in Ohio. And again, what it does, why are they doing it? Not because they just think the technology is cool, but it reduces drag and improves fuel efficiency, reducing emissions. It enables them to do, have more efficient for drivers, for everybody else. And again, Stacy, I don't know if you have the numbers, but what I've seen, kind of from different organizations, you're looking at about a 10 to 20% reduction in fuel usage. Stacy, do you have any numbers from what you guys are seeing?
No, we just started this last month, so we're still in the beginning phases of tracking everything.
But, and then one of the things is kind of more strategically is we need to explore electrifying the Ohio highways. So in Germany and Sweden, there's a little bit of a lag. In Germany and Sweden, they've started electrifying some of the highways. And the benefits of that is, right, electricity is much more efficient to run motors. But loading a truck filled with batteries to drive, 400 miles is like, it's very costly. So if we could have, the on-road charging, like in this case, above the ground, you're going to reduce the cost of your batteries, which is by far the most expensive thing. It's going to reduce your cost per vehicle, improve your energy efficiency because you don't have to, instead of charging the battery, using it just to power the motor, you don't have to carry the weight, you don't waste time charging trucks, and it reduces the need for off-road charging infrastructure. So to me, I think this is an area we, as a community, as Ohio, needs to explore, and I think could be potentially a leader, and that would help the transition and just reduce overall cost of freight and improve our air quality and help make us a leader. And then, as we move away from freight and talk about your warehouse, right? Energy efficiency, like just moving to LED, turning off, systems that automatically turn off the light. Solar, right? Solar's become the cheapest form of electricity. You're looking at a 10 to 30% cost savings and a 50 to 100% reduction in emissions. So those two things are huge. And when you're looking at the escalating cost of electricity and the plummeting price of solar, you can transform your roof into a moneymaker. Now, I know the challenge is for a lot of folks, you're leasing, but depending if you own, there's a lot of things you can do. You can lease your roof to a solar developer. You can sign what's called a power purchase agreement where you pay no money up front. If you want to own it, you can finance your purchase. There's new financing models that make it much easier, or you just pay outright. And, you look at, I've heard the number that we've got 400 million square feet of warehouse space here in Columbus. We're just to cover 10% of that in solar. That'd be enough to power 1.2 million homes, right? We're reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. We've been improving air quality, creating jobs, generating tax revenue. So don't let your roof go to waste. ultimately, we need a Columbus and Ohio sustainability economic development strategy to surf the sustainability tsunami, right? There is an energy transition. There's literally going to be trillions of dollars as part of the IRA. They're already seeing, I think, commitments of over $600 billion in investments. We're seeing things like the new battery plants. There is just a huge money-making opportunity. And we, as a community, need to create a strategy in terms of how we're going to tackle this, how we're going to help people, educate people, get the financing, get the pieces in place so that we can all be more sustainable and profitably grow our businesses. And so I'm happy to assist you sustainably grow your business, right? Where you need help calculating emissions, profitably cutting your emissions, developing new product offerings that you can take to market, and communicate strategy and results. I'm here to help you. And so please reach out with any questions you have. You can scan with your phone to give feedback, connect with me. It's just a few question survey, and you enter your email if you want me to reach back out to you. And then you can sign up for my new newsletter I just launched last week, which I was supposed to get out my first edition this week, but things took a turn. So, questions?
Do you have any programs that are formally introduced with regards to put solar panels on top warehouses? Anybody actually? I operate a third-party warehouse, so you need to understand that.
Let me see if I heard the question, and maybe is you're asking, do I know of any programs to implement solar on warehouses? And yes, I do. I have a number of folks that I've worked with in the past that I can certainly reach out and connect you with, and we can, help you work through that. They can talk through, do all the financial modeling, help you figure out the financing and everything else. So yes, just reach out to me and be glad to make that connection. Other questions? So first, did you guys learn anything? Like, anybody not learn anything? Raise your hand if you didn't learn anything. All right. Any other questions?
Question, when you start the process of assessing your building and all the things you talked about, what is the time frame? Is it accomplished in 6 months, a year? Like, how long does it take to implement some of the ideas that you have in your presentation?
I mean, really, it varies. Like, you could be like, so let's take the easiest thing you can possibly do, which is use AI to figure out what boxes to buy. Literally, it's pull the data from your WMS, send it to the provider. They can run the analysis, and in a week have here's your options. So you're looking at that, so then you can deploy software, and again, it depends on your IT and everything else, but that can be anywhere from 2 weeks to a few months, right? A lot of the scheduling stuff into, right? If you're going to move your DC, that's a whole nother different story. So it kind of varies from like a week to, it could be, months. But again, it's what I would say is we can do an assessment, start off, identify low-hanging fruit, things that we can do quickly, and then create a plan moving forward.
Hey, Kevin, as you look in the transportation industry, have you found, like with Tesla having regenerative braking, like especially with freight for trucking, have you found probabilities of maybe solar panels and possibly using some of the momentum to through as you're moving through the streets and using some of that wind power you're hitting to also turn the turbine as well as regenerative braking to have other sources of electricity flowing to vehicles?
So, so what I am seeing is solar panels beginning to be deployed on refrigerated trucks, for the refrigeration, and, or for, like power when you're, when you're parked for AC, but you're just not gonna be able to get the power you need to actually move the truck. I think we're very early stages in truck electrification. And so I think there's gonna be a lot of, interesting dynamics in where things go, and I'm not gonna pretend to predict, but I do think, I just honestly, for long haul trucking, to me, it doesn't make sense to basically load up a truck with 10 or 15,000 pounds of batteries and all of the costs when we can do things like put, wires, like what's called catenary charging on, on highways that, we could, particularly like if you're running, like, for example, say there's 10,000 trucks a day running on this highway. If we cut the cost per truck by $50,000, you now have, and use that to build out something like this. You can save a ton of money. It'll still be cheaper. So again, I think we're early in stages, but you're not going to be able to tell a truck just with the solar energy from its rooftop.
Well,
Did that answer your question?
Are you finding the source of the electricity then for these trucks coming from the burning of fossil fuels, or primarily through more sustainable power generation?
So right now, like in Ohio, it's going to be almost 100% from fossil fuels, but the electricity, right, depending on like batteries, and I think they're about 70% efficient versus fossil fuel, like engines are about 30% efficient. So you're going to wind up getting, even though you're still using like coal or whatever, you're still going to be wind up much lower emissions. And as we decarbonize, switch more and more to renewable, to nuclear, to wind, etc., then you go to zero from the electrical section, and you're seeing that solar is becoming much cheaper than coal. So you're seeing coal plants being shut down just because of profitability, and now you're seeing things like geothermal, enhanced geothermal, which allow very steady, aren't intermittent, that are beginning to come on board to fill in some of the gaps. Other questions? Did that answer the question? And I know, let's see, we are at time. I'm certainly happy. I'm really not going anywhere. I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions, but please feel free to reach out. Happy to discuss further. Happy to make this presentation to teams at your work to help you think about how do you, take some of the work you've done, because the thing is, what I realized, like Bath and Body Works, they had this great article in the Wall Street Journal talking about their nearshoring success, and they didn't mention sustainability at all because they didn't really have anybody who could calculate what they did, but they have this amazing sustainability story that they should be trumpeting from the roofs. And so as you think about your strategies to optimize costs, you've opened a second DC to reduce, your zones, that's a sustainability story, right? And I can help you, tell that story and help you, win more business, because that's really what you're going to see is more and more demand for, tell me where you are, where you're going, because the big companies and governments and everything else are looking to their suppliers cut their emissions, and those that can tell that story will be the ones that win the business. All right, I'm going to be quiet because I know you guys have to get to the next session. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye, Kevin.
Bye.